Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be checking out the new released Hot Toys Spider-Man Homecoming. This is product code MMS425 and this is Spider-Man. The figure stands at 11.2 inches high and is slated to release actually this month, February 2018. It depicts Tom Holland's portrayal of Spider-Man, which moviegoers first got to see in Captain America Civil War, which was released to theaters in 2016. Didn't have to wait too much longer after that, as Spider-Man got his own standalone movie entitled Spider-Man Homecoming, was released to theaters a year later in 2017. Displaying options, the folks over at Hot Toys include a display stand featuring Spider-Man Homecoming on the top here, and of course Spider-Man Homecoming, or Spider-Man Peter Parker specifically, on the front placard. The display base is nice. It's not overly large, so it can fit perfectly among my many other 6-scale figures on my display, and it does have the adjustable neck featured for Spider-Man. It's a shame, though, that the neck is not longer, but I think the problem is by keeping the base as small as they have, they can't make the neck all that much longer. The reason why I would have loved to see a longer neck is if you are displaying Spider-Man in a flight pose, you certainly would want to have a little bit more wiggle room, a little bit more space to have him so he doesn't look like he's kind of just levitating over top of the display base. Granted, still, like I had mentioned, if the neck had been longer, the base would also have to been bigger to compensate for the fact that you would have, off-balanced weight sitting up at the top there. Ultimately, a sacrifice has been made to keep the base smaller, and ultimately through the process of that, they've also kept the adjustable neck also small. Atop, or slightly atop, of the adjustable neck is the adjustable waist clip. Simply just pinching it open will be able to mount itself around Spider-Man's waist, and they've got some extra felt in there as well, so it's not going to add too much damage to his belt or his waist area. Now, I will still be a little careful putting it around his belt because he's got the additional Spider-Man web shooting capsules on the side. I definitely do not want to start rubbing it against that, or potentially run the risk of having it starting to separate itself away from the fabric. So I may also maybe go the route of having the clamp a little higher up on the torso so I don't have to accidentally worry, or through the process of it, accidentally have damage done here. Spider-Man's outfit goes back to a more traditional looking set of duds, although it's still got its own modern spin on it. Modern spin being the fact that they've incorporated these additional black lines around his outfit and the black hairs around his belt. Have to admit, I wasn't all that crazy about it when I first saw it in Captain America Civil War. Have since changed my mind, and I do like the costume quite a bit. And I think a lot of the times I just compared it to Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man outfits, which did have the more raised webbing. In the case of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, you've got a more very fine webbing that's on here. It's actually more print than it is an actual material that's raised on the surface. One of the other things that kind of was a deal breaker for me initially was the additional panel lining that was in the blue. I have to again admit I may have jumped too soon to say I didn't like the costume. Since then, I have really warmed up to it. Spider-Man's default head is that of his head inside the mask, and the mask is good, although when I did do the unboxing of it, and something I still want to mention here, the seam, let me just turn it around here from the side here, the seam runs all the way up the top and across the top and around to the front. It's not as bad on the back because it's lining almost parallel even onto the line of where the web is, so it slightly hides it. It doesn't hide it, however, when it gets to the front where you see a much more apparent seam line that's just far enough off the edge of where that web line is that you do really notice it. I don't really care for the fact that it's there. Granted, again, where they would have put the seam may have been a more trickier feat. This obviously is makes more sense to have had it here. I don't really like it though, and I've kind of since tried to try to move that seam over, but ultimately it's still never going to really line up to the web line here on the mask. Despite that little small nitpick, it's actually a really nice head sculpt. The mask itself isn't plastic, so I'm glad they went this route. Instead, it's a fabric that's wrapped over a plastic head. You still have the indication here of ears and a nose and not quite a mouth, but at least the bridge of the nose is present. You can give a little bit of wiggle to the actual fabric and you can move it a little bit. And I do really like that because it looks like it blends better to the actual outfit. One of the problems with previous Spider-Man releases is some of them have gone the route of using plastic or like a rubber mask kind of over top of the actual head sculpt, and yet the body still remained fabric, which was a slight disconnect from one another. Amazing Spider-Man, I think, also still used the route of a fabric outfit. I think it was actually only Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, the very first Hot Toys, which did have the rubber mask, and it was a slight disconnect from the fabric down below here. One thing that's neat that they've added to this particular Spider-Man is the inclusion of all these additional eye areas. Little eye patches that can go over top of his existing mask. They're all magnetized, however, they're not the easiest to take off of the figure itself. Even in the instructions, they've indicated to be very cautious when removing it. You simply can't just wiggle your finger over it. A lot of times what I've ended up having to do is either take a bit of the webbing or take like a very, very blunt screwdriver, something that doesn't have a point to it, to try to peel it up. In fact, here's my screwdriver right here. I think what they could have done, and see, it's very easy to actually take off if you have the proper tool for it. What I would probably advise suggesting is if you have, for example, maybe like an Iron Man figure, any one of the ones that have the little plastic tab, it's kind of like the shape of a teardrop. Probably use that to take this off, because the last thing you would want to do is cause damage to the side areas or the outer areas of where the eyeball would sit inside. I mean, it's magnetized, so that's one good thing I like about it. It's not pegged, so don't have to like force it out. But it doesn't make the easiest, let me tell you, to try to take the eyeball out. Longer nails also could come quite handy at this moment. Ultimately, again, just using a very unpointed, don't use a screwdriver that has a point to it. A flat-headed screwdriver would be ideal. There should be really an easier way to do this. I haven't found it, to be honest, though. If we count the eyes that I've already removed, you get actually a total of 10 eyes. And the eyes will vary. If we look at the white eyes themselves, you have a regular eye. And keeping in mind you have pairs of each one. You have a slightly more narrower eye. That was a tough word for me to say. And you have also a squinting eye. Fans of the scene as well, there's also the kill mode eye, which is a slightly darker pupil. And the idea is, in the movie, it looks a little bit better, I have to admit, in the movie, where this part here it's obviously lit up. Hot Toys does give you like a red, almost retina, but it's not quite as bright as I think it could be. It's got some nice outlining here in the little panel lines that make up the actual eye, where you can see how individual panels would have moved to correspond with whatever lesser or greater amounts of light Spider-Man would need. I'm going to go ahead and replace the eyes, which are magnetized. Like I said, that part at least is good. And what I will do is I'll replace the other eye with the more slotted eye, so you can see the difference between the two. Favoring more so this eye myself, I do like the fact that Hot Toys would incorporate and include additional, patches that you can remove out and swap out, depending on which style you'd like to have Spider-Man. Mind you, though, if you don't even want this head sculpt altogether, they also have included a Tom Holland Peter Parker head sculpt, which is an excellent likeness of Tom Holland, and equally so Peter Parker from the movie. Let's go ahead and take the head off, just pop it simply off of its ball joint and replace it with Peter Parker's head. Initially, I think when I did the unboxing, I didn't have the head nearly enough down, so when you are putting it onto the neck socket, just make sure you push it down enough that it doesn't look like he's got a very long neck. This head sculpt is quite good. Both the face as well as the hair is some of Hot Toys' best. Admittingly so, I have to say that I'm not crazy about the fact that the eyes are slightly lingering off to the side. The Marty McFly from Back to the Future 2, recently looked at in an unboxing, also shared the same sort of thing. I guess they want to go the different route of having, instead of just the eyes always looking forward, it's giving something a little bit different. Ultimately, though, I do feel like the eyes would have looked better straight on, but that's only my own personal opinion. Each head, by the way, is hand-painted, and you can really see the level of care that they put into it. Much like a teenager's skin, there's going to be imperfections right there. And while Peter Parker's skin is relatively clean and clear of imperfections, you can see that there are varying degrees of flesh tone that has been incorporated to the surface of the plastic here. And of course, I would be doing a disservice to the face if I didn't mention the eyes. I like the fact that the gloss has been, a gloss coat has been covered over top of the eyes, so the eyes do look like they have a little bit more life to them as well. I suppose as well, while we're looking at this particular head sculpt, we could have a look at a couple of accessories maybe suited a little bit more for Peter Parker, one of which he comes with a knapsack, and we can go ahead and open up the knapsack. We looked at this before as well in the unboxing video. The knapsack sadly doesn't really have anything to speak of inside. We unzip it. Essentially what you're treated to is just some batting, some cotton batting that's lined inside just to kind of give it a little bit extra padding. A really realistic looking knapsack. It never disappoints when we get these little extra accessories. They look like a larger version, a 1-to-1 scale, just simply shrunk down. There's a zipper on the front, but it doesn't look like there's a zipper, an actual zipper on it, as well as here. There's really only one working zipper. Actually, scratch that. There are two working zippers, one at the back and then one at the front, both of which would be lined with the same similar batting. He also gets himself a pair of headphones, which technically don't really fit well over Peter's head. It's very, very tight. You can feel that it's starting just to stress as you're putting it down on top of the head. The headphones, despite the fact I said are more catered to Peter Parker, actually fit a little bit better when you put it over top of Spider-Man's head. And again, they just sit very easily onto the sides. Would I ever display it necessarily with this head sculpt and then on top of that with the headphones? Likely no, but it is a nice touch just to have them included as well. Let's not also forget Peter's copy of Science Today, 2nd edition to be exact. I mentioned this also in the unboxing video, that inside it's rather neat that it doesn't have anything really to do with science, and more so for the handling of this 6-scale figure. If you can't quite make it out, let me read it off to you. It says, this product is suitable for ages 15 and up. Please read the instructions carefully before you open the product. Yes, I can actually read that. Small print, yes, but luckily I eat enough carrots that I can make that I can make that out. The pages are the exact same to one another, and it's the same read up here as it is here. They've just simply changed the format of the paragraphs and the way it's written out, just so it looks like it's slightly different, but the instructions on both sides are identical to one another. Changing the head sculpt back to Spider-Man, one thing I want to also show you too is his web shooters. Now, he has, funny enough, 2 different pairs of web shooters. We make sure we spin that around. But he does actually have 2. And what's interesting about it, and quite unnecessary if you ask me, one web shooter, if you can hopefully make it out, doesn't have a hole. Doesn't have a hole for shooting the web. However, if you swap it out for this web shooter, there's a hole present there that you can slot the included webs into. I don't really... Granted, yes, I mean, you know, if you put the 2 side by side, there's really not much different between them other than the fact that the one does have the hole and one does not. They simply could have easily just packed the figure with the web shooter hole already included. I don't really get the necessary addition of adding 2 separate web shooters if the only difference is really that one hole there. Spider-Man Homecoming also marked the return of the spider webs, the web wings that Spider-Man has worn in the comics. The wings themselves are a slightly translucent plastic, slightly a more smokier looking plastic, which you can see gets a little bit darker as it gets to closer to the armpit area of Spider-Man, and gets a little bit progressively lighter as it goes out. The webbing is slightly curved as well, and the actual web portions of the wings is elevated from the rest of the surface. Now these are all magnetized, but they're not the easiest to really get into place. For starters, the web is really long, and you've got this sharp point right at the bottom. Mindful of when you put these into Spider-Man's arms, and you really don't even have to put them into Spider-Man's arms, simply just kind of move the arms out of the way. But you might find yourself doing a lot of kind of clearance adjusting to get these to properly sit. They are magnetized, sure, but you have to kind of just keep adjusting and tweaking these until you get the desired effect. If the arms are too far low, obviously the web sticks right into the arm and doesn't really look natural. So you have to make sure that the arm itself is high enough that the web sits naturally against the body. It also doesn't have any sort of forgiving nature to it either, so you have to bring it close to the body without leaving a very noticeable gap. The legs are probably as straight as you would want them. To move them any further bit out, again, you've got that little sharper corner of the web wing. The last thing you would want to do is start wearing a little hole or scratch on the side of the fabric here. But the web wings otherwise look quite good, and it's really neat to have them included with the figure. And to jump back once again to the Peter Parker head sculpt, one of the other accessories I forgot to mention was he comes with also a removed mask. It's just a loose version of the mask, similar to this, of course, just collapsed down. No, you can't put it over top of his face. It's seamed shut. The opening is just small enough that it conveys the idea that it could be, it could be worn. You simply just can't put it over top of him. If you're also wondering, it doesn't look like you can remove the eyes on this. I don't really think you would need to anyways, but they are almost identical to one another. Material-wise, the plastic of the eyes feel very similar as well. It's just a more collapsed state of it. Unfortunately, with this mask, though, despite the fact that they include it, they don't really give you the proper hand to hold the mask in place. Sure, they give you a whole bunch of different hands that have holes in them, really designated for the webs themselves. There's one of them right there that has a little slot. I thought I might have been able to very carefully kind of wedge it in there, but there's really nothing rigid inside the mask. If they had only put even like a little rod or something on the side here, just enough that you could tuck it into the glove, you could do that as well. But because there's like literally there's nothing in here that's hard enough where you'd be able to slip it into his hand here. Ultimately, though, what I ended up doing was making use of one of these kind of slightly gripping hands, or web, like kind of wall crawling hands. This one here actually is the best that I've been able to find, and all you can really do is kind of fit it in between his finger and his thumb, and then just get just a very small fraction of the glove and wedge it in between his fingers. It's enough that it looks like he's holding it, and not simply it's just levitating in his hand. It's successful enough that it doesn't look forced, but they could have probably come up with a better hand to include to hold the mask here. Okay, last time we're going to switch it back to Spider-Man's head. Other accessories he comes included with is a tray of various different webbings. We've looked at this already as well. The webbing is a kind of translucent white plastic, has a little bit of give to it, but nothing in which that you would want to be bending it all that much. He comes with one that has a slight curve to it. He has a couple that are just simply straight, and then he has ones in which it looks like he's just starting to shoot the web. They almost come across a little bit more like web kind of Q-tips, if anything, but they have some really cool, intricate little design details to them as well. They're not quite even white. They're almost more like a pearlesque sort of a clear color. And again, you can either have them fit into, let me just grab one of them here. You can have it either fit into one of the web shooters, and it just kind of tucks inside like so. Or in some instances, if you, well, not specifically this one, but let's say we take one of the straight ones. you can take one of the hands, he has comes with a pair of these, where it's got a little slot inside, so it looks like he just shot the web and now he's swinging from it. So there's a couple of different variations there. One of the other things that comes included too is a more shot out web, come across actually more like a full designed spider web. And any one of these, well, any one of the webs, not counting the Q-tip webs, you can just simply take the end of it and slot it into place. I've never really found a proper use to display it with these, other than really you could have it look as if he's hanging down from it if properly supported by the display stand, or again you could have it look like he's shooting it outward. Already discussed this as well, and he comes with a series of interchangeable hands defaulted right now to the sockets. These aren't the hands that came out of the packaging, but I've got him slightly gripping hands currently in the sockets of his forearms. Get him to stand straight. He's also got a series of, well, let's run through them. Web shooting hands. Of course, Spider-Man has to come with web shooting hands. A pair of web wall climbing hands. All of them have the shooters also on the palms. Then he comes with a pair of web holding hands. Let me see if I can grab the other one. There it is right there. A pair of web holding hands for swinging. Making this gesture here. And then he's got a pair of closed fists, which is probably like the most boring of the fists included with Spider-Man. Posability on this guy. His head moves up, down, and rotates left to right. I don't feel like I'm jeopardizing any bit of the material when I am moving the head left to right. The head feels like it's... I'm never going to get really forceful anyways with the head where I feel like the seam is going to start giving away. So, you know, have no worries that you can move the head back and forth. There doesn't seem to be any problems whatsoever. The arms, unfortunately, do click out, and I would have to see maybe other reviews to see if that is the case across the board. I would imagine that it can't just be mine that's clicking outward. The arms do move forward, but as you could probably expect, you can only move them so much before the fabric starts to kind of tighten itself around the socket area. Bicep swivel. He's got the double hinge on the elbow here, and by the nature of the way that the hands plug into place, he's got a hinge with also a peg on the end, meaning that the hands can hinge this way back and forth. You can also rotate them all the way around. He gets an upper torso crunch as well as a waist swivel. Legs hinge out, which have that same clickety ratchet as we were discussing earlier with the arms here. They hinge and ratchet out. I hope, again, that be the case across the board. Swivel on the top portion of the thigh, bend at the knee, and when you get to the foot, really an adequate amount of both ankle pivot as well as forward and back. One of the things that the instructions also indicate too, and I've started seeing this with a lot of the Hot Toy releases, is that they stress that you really don't want to be putting this guy in a lot of dramatic poses and then leaving it. They do indicate in the instructions, and I would take the instructions at face value, that if you leave the joints in certain poses, it could start causing damage to the fabric. So just be aware of that when you are displaying this guy. The Hot Toys Spider-Man Homecoming Spider-Man is exactly what I would have wanted to get from this figure. An all-around well-built figure with some really good trinkets and cool accessories, and of course the interchangeable head sculpt. There is also a deluxe version of this guy, which is basically going to be everything that we've covered off in this review, and then of course there's going to be some extra accessories. There's like a jacket and stuff like that as well. Oftentimes I may pick up the deluxe version, but if there's just a case of costume changes, a lot of times if I ask myself, will I ever display the figure with those articles of clothing? And if I can answer a very resounding no, then I probably just generally pass on the figure altogether. This figure has everything I would want. I don't feel like I'm missing anything by not getting the deluxe. Regarding the head sculpt, though, both the Spider-Man head sculpt as well as the Peter Parker head sculpt are excellently done. Although, kind of like the Marty McFly that we looked at from the Back to the Future 2 movie, Peter Parker has the problem with the eyeballs kind of lingering off to the side. I kind of wish that he would just looking straight forward and not slightly to the side. But I guess Hot Toys wanted to play around a little bit, because I mean every figure generally has a very blank stare on their face and they're looking straight forward. I guess they wanted to do something a little bit different by having Tom Holland's facial profile looking slightly to the side instead of from the front. The wings are a nice touch. Be a little careful of putting those onto his arms. You don't certainly want to puncture any bit of fabric in his legs. And overall, I like the figure with the fact that you can get the removable mask, although I just wish there was proper means to have those displayed in his hands. He doesn't really have the suitable hands for really holding it. You can get it in his hands, but not really to the level where it looks as natural as I think it probably could be. Still a great looking figure. This guy is slated to be released in February 2018. So if you guys are interested in picking this guy up for yourself, you can head over to Sideshow Collectibles right now and pre-order this guy for $229.99. Of course, the deluxe version is going to be a little bit more. I honestly think you don't really need the deluxe version for the things that figure has that this one doesn't necessarily have. I think this figure really hits everything that one would want for a Spider-Man figure. I'm looking forward to, and also the packaging indicates this as well, that you are not supposed to replace, or you're not supposed to put the mask on Peter Parker's head, but they also allude you're not supposed to put the Vulture helmet on Peter Parker's head either, which gives me hope that we're going to eventually get ourselves a Vulture figure as well. I'd love to get the two of them going side by side. Anyways, though, guys, this figure currently, like I said, is on pre-order over at Sideshow Collectibles. If you guys are looking to get this guy in your collection right now, make sure you hit that pre-order before supplies run out. Today, though, we were having a look at the Hot Toys Spider-Man Homecoming Spider-Man figure. If you guys also want to head back to the channel and check out some previously looked at Hot Toys reviews, I've got a playlist that you can check out and watch at your viewing pleasure. All of that can be done, though, if you hit that little subscribe button. So if you haven't done it so already, make sure you do so. You'll never miss a beat when it comes to future videos. As always, guys, thanks for watching, as you always do. I'll see you guys next time.